Hey everyone, Zeddy here again today with a brand new video, and today I want to do a bit of a different video, do more of a discussion-based, more long-term talk about Hearthstone, and in particularly about the class of Shaman. As the title reads, why is Shaman so bad? We recently had yet another balance patch where we saw another Shaman card get buffed, this time being Totem Goliath. We had seen other cards get buffed, like Lurker Below, Torrent, and some other cards in prior sets, and Shaman just continues to underperform. It's either the last ranked class on HS Replay, or like right now it's just above Warlock, but if you look at like top Legend or Legend rank, it's just the worst. Like, it has one kind of well-performing deck right now in Totem Shaman, and at like top like 1000 Legend, it just completely falls off. It doesn't even have a 50% win rate. There's just no real viable competitive Shaman archetype, and this has been a persisting thing throughout Hearthstone. If you take a look at Shaman throughout the history in most recent times, historically, it hasn't been that great that often. And when it's been good, it's been busted, right? It's been just out of control. So historically, when has that happened? Well, most recently, we had Galakrond Shaman in the Descent of Dragons launch that was ridiculously good. We had Quest Shaman during Old Doom that was very powerful. We had Evolve Shaman during like the Doom and the Tomb event, which was broken, like the best deck in the game. We've had Mid-Range Shaman quite a couple of years back, was very good for like nearly a year. That was around like Tunnel Trog, Totem Golem. There was like the Inspire buff card as well. We've seen Aggro Shaman succeed as well with Tunnel Trog, Doomhammer, Rockbiter, things like that. We've also seen Shutterwalk Shaman do really well with, of course, the infinite chaining of Shutterwalk, enabled by Grumble, Serenite Chain Gang, and the infinite damage/healing of Life Drinker. And of course, even Shaman was very good because, well, Gen gave 1 mana hero power, you know, Thing from Below, 4 mana 7/7, Totem Golem, cards like that. Flame Tongue Totem for a while was 2 mana, was absurd in that deck. And more recently, we also had Aggro Shaman, which was weapon-based. It had like Thunderhead, Doomhammer, Rockbiter, but was really fueled by Spirit of the Frog. So why isn't Shaman good right now? Why has it been so good before, but right now it's really bad? Well, right now there's no clear win condition for Shaman. If you look through the collection, you look through your Shaman card collection right now, there's just not really a win condition. There's like big Shaman support with Muckmorpher, but that's literally where it ends. That's where it ends. There's no Incestuous Call, there's no Eureka, you have Muckmorpher. And there's not even that many good minions to hit. You have like Colossus of the Moon, Scrapyard Colossus, and there's a couple other like biggish minions, but again, when you only have one way to really cheat it out, that archetype's just dead in the water. Aggro Shaman doesn't really have the early game to compete with other decks. You have Lightning Bloom, you have Voracious Reader, which is a neutral option, and you can, you know, buff your board +1/+1, but when every single good early tempo-based deck in the game right now has good 1-drops, good tempo removal, and they have good draw to substantiate everything to go with that and value generation, it just can't keep up. They can have the occasional high roll where they do something good, but it doesn't work. And, well, as I mentioned, draw is extremely lacking in Shaman. You have, like, Farsight, you have Manatide Totem. That's it in the base set, or in Shaman in general. You have neutral options, like Voracious Reader, as I mentioned, and Loot Hoarder and Novice Engineer, but those are not very good, and when other classes like Rogue have Secret Passage, or Mage's Cran Session, Druida's Overflow, it's very hard to compete when you really can't draw cards, keep up in resources with the other classes, and you're lacking on value generation, outside of maybe playing the quest, things like that, and that just is very low tempo, and you just kind of fall behind. And another fundamental issue is overload. The key mechanic of Shaman has effectively been a complete failure as a mechanic for Shaman. Its downside, basically, it has too huge a cost for its payoff. Losing that mana, de-ramping yourself, it's such a huge sacrifice in a game that requires maximizing tempo, maximizing mana efficiency. Yes, you get an early payoff. You get to, like, Lightning Bolt on 1. It's like a 1 mana cheat, right? Dealing 3 damage for 1 mana is effectively cheating a mana, so you overload 1. But it doesn't really work out that way because you set yourself behind that mana the next turn. That increased slight advantage is just downsided so much by your de-ramping. I think one of the best examples of this is if you look at Flame Wreath Faceless, the iconic 4 mana 7/7. This is a War Golem you can play on turn 4. It's 3 mana ahead of the curve of a War Golem. It only overloads you for 2, and it still wasn't very good outside of when Tunnel Trog was really prevalent in the game, because the snowball effect of that 1-drop made the card good. Once Tunnel Trog rotated, the 4 mana 7/7 saw no play in Standard, and in Wild, it saw fringe play in even Shaman, and again, it's not really one of the good cards in that deck. You get this insane payoff, even with the overload. It's too much. Going down to 3 mana the next turn is just too much, because every class typically has an efficient removal of some sort on a big minion. Every class has efficient removals to everything. Efficient plays. And overload is the opposite of efficient. It's like a mana cheat bomb, but it's never a big enough bomb for it to be relevant. Overload has just always come with too big a price. Take it, for example, as well, Totem Goliath, which was recently a 5 mana 4/5 overload 2, unplayable. 2 overload on that was ridiculous. Now it's a 5 mana 5/5 overload 1. It's still too much. It's still too much of a downside that the card doesn't see play. Also, you know, the build around of totems isn't the best, but you get my point. Overload is just such a negative that it really has to, like, be insane for it to pay off. The only time you have seen overload pay off is because of cards like Tunnel Trog, which is a premium statted, infinitely snowballing minion on 1 that benefits from the overload, making the overload effect not really that big a downside. You see this even like Discard and Warlock, where discard doesn't become good until it's an upside, effectively, because the discard is such a bad thing. Another example is like Thunderhead. Thunderhead made Overload worth it because you got 1/1s with Rush on top of your 3/6 for 4 mana, which was really good and made a lot of decks viable. So yeah, Overload is just doesn't work in its current state. It just doesn't. The punishment is too hard, and it just doesn't allow Shaman to really succeed when a lot of their classic and basic set is built around Overload that has just fundamentally been power creeped so far into the game that Overload is just beyond playable for the most part. The next point, the last point I want to make, is the hero power for Shaman flat out sucks. It's just bad. It's by far the worst in the game. It's random, it's unreliable, and many of the totems are flat out useless in a lot of situations. You get a 1/1 totem, it just dies to a dagger or a ping, it feels bad. Gets value traded by a 1-mana 1/2. And also, I mentioned earlier that so many classes have 1-mana 2/2s or 1/2 1-drops that any totem you hero power onto is dead. It's gone. Like, it's never going to stick around. So your totems are effectively useless, and when, you know, Blizzard's trying to make Totem Shaman a deck, and it's the only currently somewhat viable one, but again, when you're playing at higher ranks or against good players, your totems are never sticking on the board because they're just garbage. And then you can't snowball, you can't win the game, you can't take advantage of your totem generation. So it just makes it nearly impossible for, you know, Shaman to utilize its hero power, which is, you know, a fundamental part of the game is the hero power for any class. And it's just, you know, kind of a useless aspect. When two core issues of Shaman are flat out just bad, almost useless in Overload and their hero power, it's kind of a big deal. So how do you fix Shaman? How do we fix this issue? Historically, the only way Shaman has really been relevant is, well, to break the game and just give it broken cards. Tunnel Trog, Shudderwalk, Evolve come to mind. Also, the recent Galakrond addition to the game. All the cards are just grossly undercosted, overstated. Like you had Dragon's Pack, which was just a 5-mana 10/12 in Taunt. You had a 5-mana double invoke card. You had a 1-mana freeze, get a 2/1. Like, it was just, they were just all busted, and literally every invoke-based Shaman card got nerfed. Because they were all just, like, ridiculous, right? And then once they became fair, the deck is crap. Because Shaman can't elevate the deck beyond anything other than that. It needs broken cards, because it effectively has nothing to back it up. Another example was Spirit of the Frog. Made a lot of these decks viable. The aggro one I mentioned earlier, the Evolve deck I mentioned earlier, were not viable without Spirit of the Frog. It was effectively a 3-mana concealed auctioneer that tutored. That's pretty broken. And yeah, it did a lot of broken stuff. It made those decks really, really good. And yeah, that's basically, this has to be done in order for Shaman to see play because of the absolutely useless and garbage classic and basic Shaman cards that they have. Let's take a look. Let's do a little comparison here, okay? I'm going to compare the list of good/playable Shaman cards in the classic and basic set, and we're going to compare it to Rogue, which historically has always been a very good class near the top, and a lot of it has to do with its classic and basic set. So these are the playable cards for Shaman. And note, a lot of these aren't very good. They sometimes see zero play or a little bit of play. Like, they're not great. We have Earthshock, very fringe kind of tech card. Farsight, 3 mana, draw 1, discount some mana. Not great. Lightning Storm, pretty mediocre removal at best. Manatide Totem, 3 mana draw card, can be good like with Totemic Reflect, like the Totem cards, but even then, not great. Doomhammer, one of the more solid cards, it's a lot of damage, and it goes well with the next card, Rockbiter. Again, Doomhammer, Rockbiter go well together. One of the better combos Shaman has had and has relied on. Hex, okay hard removal, not fantastic. And Bloodlust, good for when there's like sticky, minion-based decks where they actually can have it stick around. But again, it's very contingent on that being around, which relies on broken cards. That's basically it. You look through the rest of the Shaman cards, they're really not great. You can make an argument maybe for like Firemental and Alakir, but honestly, outside of like even Shaman, in the last 2 years, when have those cards really been prevalent at all? They just don't really pop up. So again, let's compare this to Rogue. Let's look at the Rogue Classic and Basic set of their good and playable cards. Again, these are cards that never rotate. They're evergreen. They keep staying around unless they get Hall of Famed. You have Backstab, one of the best cards ever in Hearthstone. Deadly Poison, very versatile weapon buff. Sap, one of the best tempo removals in the game. Fan of Knives, decent AoE and draw, not fantastic. Preparation, sees play here and there, used to be busted, is pretty good. Shadow Step, unbelievably crazy card, just nuts. Eviscerate, really good, reach, damage, removal, fantastic card. Edwin, the most broken legendary left in the classic set, insanely good. It's not just a 3 mana 2/2, it's an auto win card in a lot of games. SI Agent, good tempo removal, sees play here and there, and Shiv, deal a damage cycle, it's not too bad. So again, you can see the clear disparity in the power level, and it's common against like other classes. I'm just using Rogue here. Mage has a really good classic set in comparison. Druid has a lot of good stuff. And basically, in order for Shaman to not suck without just brute forcing the class with overpowered cards, that typically leads the community to revolt. I mean, Evolved Shaman made people want to quit the game. Galakron Shaman, again, caused people to revolt. I had a Reddit post that was super upvoted about it. Like, it was just crazy. The class, in my opinion, without, just printing broken, crazy cards that'll rotate, is the class needs a rework. The base set needs to be revamped. Overload as a whole, I think, needs to be reworked or abolished. And the hero power, I do think there's a chance that this is going to happen. I think there's a good shot it's going to happen next year. The team has already talked about a change happening to the basic and classic set next year rotation. It's why we haven't seen replacements for the most recent Hall of Fame cards in Leroy, Spellbreaker, etc. So I kind of want to throw out my opinion of what I'd like to see have a change. First, I would like to see Overload probably remain in the game because it is iconic with Shaman, but I think the downside of it needs to be much less extreme. We saw with like Priest how they like decrease the cost of like Shadow or Death, Holy Nova. I think something similar should happen with Overload. For instance, for example, I would see like Lightning Storm instead of overloading for 2, would overload for 1. Doomhammer instead of 2, overload for 1, etc., etc. Things like that. It kind of keeps it in line with the way the game has ramped up in power level. You could also just bump up the effects of these cards and keep the overload intact. But I would like to see overload like really scale back, entirely. Make it like so that it's not like a game-killing detriment. The hero power I would also rework. I have 2 suggestions for the hero power. Both revolve around it not being random. First, something I would prefer, which I think would add a lot of strategy to Shaman and make it a lot more interesting, is your first hero power of the game, you discover the hero power. You discover which one you want. And after that, it would go in a specific order. So, like, say you take Taunt Totem, then it would go in order. Like, you would have a set order. It could even show it, where you go, like, healing, spell damage, 1/1, whatever. And then you could kind of, game plan how you anticipate your opponent might play and what totems you might want in the future. Probably a little bit too ambitious. My other suggestion, and I've seen it suggested before, is just have the totems go in a certain set order. That they always summon a 1/1 on turn 2, or the first roll, a taunt the next roll, spell damage the next roll, healing next roll, etc., etc., so that the players just know what totems that they're going to roll. You could also rework it just entirely to be something different, but I don't want to go down that road. That's a whole theory crafting, and I just kind of want to keep things flavorful, not too different, but at least a way where a player can realistically impact the game depending on how they utilize their hero power, which could lead to better strategies. Lastly, I would just introduce some kind of decent card draw into the classic base set for Shaman. There is a card I would consider that's already exists out there. It's Ancestral Knowledge. It's 2 mana, draw 2, overload 2. I'd probably reintroduce it with Overload 1, but something like that, where they have an Arcane Intellect type card. Because I think Shaman, it's fair to have draw. You could even insert a card that's very flavorful and sticks with the Shaman identity, like Storm Chaser, which is a 3 mana 3/4 elemental that would draw out a spell that costs 5 or less. Give Shaman a bit of draw, maybe a tutor. And, Shaman likes their big AoEs, and that's very flavorful. And go with the whole, theme of Shaman. And I just think that the draw that they currently have is just not enough. With these kind of changes, I don't think you would have to necessarily rely on printing a broken card like Shudderwalk or Tunnel Trog or something along those lines where it's completely overpowered, ridiculously good, and yeah, it's going to carry any deck or archetype to be good just through brute power force of like how powerful the cards are. And I don't think that's a particularly healthy way to go in the long term balancing the class. So that's my thoughts on what's wrong with Shaman and how you would fix it. I thought it'd be an interesting topic to cover considering how much Shaman has struggled, and we have a rotation coming up, within like half a year or so, and just thought it'd be fun to throw these out there, maybe get some ideas going, and let me know in the comments below, what do you think needs to be done to make Shaman a better class for the long-term future of Hearthstone? Do you agree, disagree with anything I said? It's always fun to have that debate, and if you enjoyed this video and you like more of these type of videos, let me know as well. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe, and a friendly reminder, about 65% of you guys are subbed, so if you're not subbed yet, if you believe I've earned your sub, I would really appreciate it if you hit that sub button down below. Have a great day, and stay salty, my friends.